Hey, athletes, is Debbie Potts, and I'm recording a podcast today with Panos, who I talked to. I just looked it up, January 2019, after I ran into him every day during Ironman Hawaii in 2018, as he was promoting PNOE Metabolic Testing cart kind of backpack that we are going to go over again because I have been looking into testing metabolic efficiency testing at rest and exercise for my clients and local athletes in San Diego area. And I reached out to him to dive into new research on metabolic efficiency testing, how we can collect this data and help create a personalized coaching program, as I do with my clients, with the elements of the holistic method. Take the data we can collect from a resting metabolic test and exercise test. If it's on a bike, treadmill, or I have some people that row on an erg, we can test on there. Or some clients are not runners or cyclists, so we could do it on whatever they normally work out on, say they do elliptical. So we're going to go into that, but then how do we take that data and apply it to your workout programs? And then how can we figure out nutrition and macros with that information, or can we? So more data we can collect, the more I can personalize, or you can personalize a program to help you learn how to fuel, train, and perform your best as an athlete. But for daily life, it's really important to feel good and thrive every day and not struggling to get through the day. And then, as I say every show, train for our future selves now. So setting us up for success when we're 80, 90 years old, doing everything we can do now to improve the aging process. So part of that is how we train. We endurance athletes have been talking for a long, long time about max aerobic function, training 80% or more of that time, depending where you are in your training cycle. If you're just starting, you might be full-time, 100%, maybe some 30-second sprints in there, working on that zone 1, zone 2 workout, or we call max aerobic function, looking at Maffetone formula 180 minus your age to figure out your numbers, figure out your zones. So say you're 40 years old, you've been working out consistently, you're not sick, you're not injured. So we'll start you at 140 heart rate as your max aerobic function. And so your range might be 120 to 140 aerobic based training. And then when appropriate, we're going to add in maybe 2 workouts a week that will be high heart rate, low heart rate. So true interval training, speed work. So maybe it's 400 meters on a track that I'm doing tonight, or doing some speed work in the pool and allowing recovery time. I notice whenever I'm doing speed work, especially in the pool, a lot of people are not resting long enough to go hard on the next interval. So looking at 20% of your workouts of speed work, quality work, that you're almost doing a rest-based interval. So you rest as long as you need to get the heart rate down and go again. But how do you know where those numbers are? We can guess with the Maffetone's max aerobic function heart rate formula, or we can test. And as I always say, test and not guess. So if you're able to find someone with a metabolic efficiency testing kit where you live, start there. If you don't, I know you can actually get someone to ship you the PNOE Metabolic Testing kit, and they can do it virtually and help you test resting where you're lying down, just breathing, working on meditation breathing, nasal breathing, working on even what we would do for improving your heart rate variability score, getting more of that parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system resiliency, that nervous system imbalance. So that's where we can test your resting metabolism, find out how much fat you are burning in carbohydrates and calories. So then the exercise test, we'll talk about that with Panos, and then we can figure out a training program for you. And then if you're training for a race or a big event, how should you train? And then I like to dig in a little deeper with my VIP clients, and let's go look at the big A race, get some B and C races in there, and then figure out where your training cycle is, how we're going to build and recover in there. And then we are going to look at how that nutrition looks for you. The male client will be different than the female client that has cycling hormones, cyclical, that follicular to luteal phase will be different. And that's going to be different than postmenopausal women. They'll be more like a man's training schedule. So we're going to dive into that today. So let me know your questions and I'll bring on Panos. Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got Panos here to talk shop about metabolic efficiency testing, training, and how we can take all this data and help you get a personalized coaching program to learn how to burn fat, improve performance, and of course, longevity, the aging process, your future you. So thanks for coming on to help us understand all this and how we can test and not guess to figure out what the best plan is for us, the endurance athlete.
Hi, Debbie. Thank you so much for having me again. It's been a while since our last chat, and excited to share about metabolic testing and the ins and outs for anyone, including weight loss, performance, and longevity clients.
So I looked it up. It was January 1st, 2019, when I posted our interview we did after I remember walking past you guys in Ironman Hawaii back when, that's going to be historic time when we had Ironman Hawaii.
Yes.
The way it was and how I'd see you every day and I stalked you down.
Yeah.
But I've always been interested in metabolic testing as I did 2005 on to like 2010 New Leaf metabolic testing cart. And then I've been always asking you guys to figure out how I can add that into my business. And now I'm in San Diego and we're looking at adding that into San Diego area, doing testing on athletes. But what have you found since 2019, January to 2023? We're recording this. What has changed in your world of PNOE and metabolic testing?
As a company, we've worked a lot on creating a holistic service around metabolic analysis. Our thesis as a company was to always make metabolic analysis and breath analysis specifically. I want to use the term breath analysis because we're not just measuring metabolism, we're actually measuring many different core physiological processes, and we can go into that into greater detail. So our mission as a company is to democratize breath analysis. And the first step towards that was making a device that can deliver clinical precision, but in a cost-efficient and practical way for the average health professional. You shouldn't be a big hospital that is equipped with people that have spent decades analyzing this information in order to provide your clients with this information. And so the first step was to create the PNOE device. The PNOE device is still the first and only clinical grade breath analysis device that is affordable and easy to use, can be used by any health professional. Now, back in 2019, 2019 was actually our first, commercial year. We started doing a few beta sales late 2018, but 2019 was really our first commercial year. So our main focus was just, launching the device. And one of the, things that we found out very early on is that the average health professional does require a pretty significant stack of software and service in order to make the data useful. The device provides easy access to the data, but it doesn't make the data useful. Making the data useful means that we are actually able to provide insights for someone's nutrition, training, and breath work. In our world, these are the three pillars on which you can program using breath analysis. And going from the very elaborate data set that you get from any clinical grade metabolic analyzer like PNOE into, hey, here's what you need to eat, here's how you need to train, and here's important breath work that is going to fix different areas of physiology. This is something that health professionals required a ton of support for. So what really has changed since 2019 is the entire support mechanism that now encompasses the PNOE device, which is basically our response to the next problem of, okay, we have easy access to data. How do we make it actionable? And how do we build a business around this information?
Yeah, well, I think that would be like all the data we collect, but no one knows what to do with it. Like I keep laughing at people with Oura Ring.
Yeah.
My HRV, for example, went from high to low. Really, it's like, okay, do I ignore it and go through my schedule, or do I just
actually
it
do
back
something with it.
and
Yeah,
recover. Yeah. And I think so
yeah.
many people get data and they don't do anything with it, like genetic reports and all the stuff we get because we hear about it on a podcast.
Correct. Yeah. So for us, bridging the gap between, the data from the device and actual programming is something that, we focused, honestly, years of development and customer research and experimentation in order to get to a point where we can safely say that, hey, you buy PNOE and you have a plug and play mechanism to launch a wellness, longevity, or performance practice within your practice. The reality is that it does require expertise to analyze the data. It does require expertise to go from data into insights. And this is pretty much, what we want to talk about today.
So let's kind of go over the basics. What is metabolic efficiency and metabolic? How do we test that? What are we looking at?
So going back to breath analysis, breath analysis is an assessment that has been around for almost 100 years now. And you should think of it as a tool that scans 4 systems in your biology: metabolism, heart function, lung function, and neurological function, nervous system. So when we talk about metabolic efficiency, caloric expenditure, fat utilization, carbohydrate utilization, we're actually focusing on one of the 4 systems. What is metabolic efficiency? Metabolic efficiency is basically how much energy, chemical energy, needs to be converted into mechanical propulsion in order for you to go from point A to point B. Our bodies, you can think of them as engines. They require fuel that goes into the system in the form of fats, carbs, proteins, pretty much the nutrients that we consume. And then our cells have the ability to utilize oxygen, oxidize them, produce carbon dioxide. And through this oxidation process, the energy within the nutrients is released. And then we use this energy in order to A, survive, and then B, move. How much energy we need in order to move is pretty much metabolic efficiency. If you're a runner, right, or any sort of endurance athlete, you obviously want to be as efficient as possible. Why? You want to be a Prius, not a 6-liter Chevrolet engine, because you want to get the most mileage out of the nutrients you're putting into your system. So metabolic analysis is pretty much the only breath analysis is the only tool that we know in science that can reliably tell you how efficient your engine is. Now, efficiency has 2 components. One component is the energy efficiency component that I just described. How much mileage I'm getting for the nutrients I'm putting in. Second angle of efficiency is what fuel am I using in order to achieve this mileage. Our body doesn't just burn one fuel, like your car, for example, that may be burning gasoline. It can use a mix of fuels. And depending on the mix of fuels it uses, it can be less efficient or more efficient. Predominantly, what we burn as humans is a mix of fats and carbohydrates. The difference is there's many differences, and obviously these differences are the reason why our cells are built to be able to oxidize both. But as an athlete, again, you have an inherent advantage if you're able to burn more fat. The principal reasons are 2. First of all, fat is a very sustainable fuel source. In other words, it doesn't produce fatigue metabolites when it is oxidized. In other words, burn as much as possible. It's not going to wear out your muscles. Second one, there is plenty of it in your body. You have about 30,000 calories worth of fat versus anywhere between 2,000 to 3,000 calories worth of carbohydrates, depending on how muscular and big you are. So you can understand that we're talking about even about an order of magnitude greater reserves in terms of fat energy versus carbohydrate energy in your body. So that pretty much is the concept of metabolic efficiency. it actually includes both concepts, how much energy efficient you are overall, and then how efficient you are in using the right substrates, which is, for the most cases, fat.
Mm-hmm. And most people all, listening or want to go, okay, I want to know if I'm burning fat or if I'm burning carbs. And if looking at nutrition, people think to do 0 carbs or too much carbs, or just figure out the dialing in their nutrition with I say just real food that balances your blood sugar. But it also depends on the intensity you are exercising, what workout session you're doing, if it's burning carbs or are you burning fat, and being able to figure that out for an individual, because everyone's different, I think is gold. So much information you can get from that to really create a successful program, versus so many people, I look at their data and I'm thinking, okay, they're way too anaerobic. They want to be doing low carb and work on being metabolically efficient and fat adapted, but all their workouts are just super high heart rate. So with testing, talk about if we're doing, why we should do a resting test and an exercise test. And let's kind of walk through that, how we collect data to figure out, are you burning fat at rest to start with? And then we'll get into exercising if you're, for example, a runner or cyclist.
Okay, so let me just address the first part of your question, which is, okay, people are trying to become more fat adapted, and they're trying to do that by going into extreme dietary manipulations, like, okay, I'm going to cancel out carbohydrates completely.
Yeah.
You are going to get most of your fat adaptation by spending time in zone 2. No matter how many carbs you cut out, go down to 0, you will never, ever, ever come close to the impact that zone 2 has in getting you to become a more fat adapted person. What is zone 2? Zone 2 is the exercise intensity where you maximize fat oxidation for your body. How do you determine that? You need to do a exercise test, exercise breath analysis test. We basically take you through different levels of intensity, and we measure how your fat and carbohydrate oxidation change as the exercise intensity increases. And by looking at the curves, we understand where fat oxidation maximizes. Around this area, we identify your zone 2, and we give you a prescription of how much time you need to be spending in this zone during your training throughout the week. Now, is there a benefit in going low carb if you want to become more fat adapted? The answer is yes. And that is going to predominantly show up in your resting test. You can, as a result, think of going low carb as something that is going to pay dividends in getting you into a fat burning mode at rest, which is good for longevity. It is good for cellular health. And you can think of zone 2 training as something that is going to pay dividends when it comes to getting you into a better fat burning condition during exercise. So going back to why we're doing testing, we're measuring your resting metabolic rate and resting metabolism in order to, first of all, prescribe nutrition programs, understand how many calories your body's burning, understand if your metabolic rate is lower than what is expected, which would mean, for example, that you first need to get your metabolism up before you go into a nutrition or exercise intervention. Nowadays, a lot of people have gone through extreme diets, and as a result, they have destroyed, quote unquote, their metabolism. And as a result, going and doing either intense training or intense dieting is not the best thing for you at the moment. You perhaps need to go through a metabolic rehab phase before you actually go into an additional intervention. So that's one thing that we get from the resting test. Another thing that we get from the resting test is fuel oxidation during resting. So fat and carbohydrate utilization. As I said earlier, the more fat adapted you are during rest, the more cellular healthy you are, and the lower the risk for metabolic disorders. In fact, studies are now showing again and again that people that have very high carbohydrate burn, so they rely a lot on carbohydrates at rest, have about 4 to 5 times greater risk of developing metabolic disorders. And that even precedes the onset of elevated blood glucose during fasted state. So it could even work as an even earlier precursor to type 2 diabetes. So being able to oxidize fat effectively at rest is extremely important for your cellular health and therefore longevity. We also use the fuel sources that the fuel sourcing information we get from the resting test in order to prescribe macronutrient breakdown for your nutrition program. So from the metabolic rate, how many calories you burn, we understand how many calories you need to eat. And then from the fuel sources, we understand how these calories need to be allocated across protein, fats, and carbs. Now, going to the to the exercise test.
Wait, can I pause there
Yes.
before you move?
Yeah.
So with the resting test, is there a way to figure out their macros? You said that figure out how many calories, but are you able to figure out at rest? I know at exercise you can't, their fat rates, but
yeah, so we measure fat and carbohydrate oxidation at rest. So we understand what proportion of fats and carbohydrates you're burning. And as a result, from this, we derive fat, carbohydrate, and therefore protein intake in your total caloric expenditure.
okay, so I just was thinking that, a lot of the information on protein right now is almost start with your protein. If you look at Dr. Gabrielle Lyon's easy formula, I think is easiest way to look at is your goal of ideal body weight pound. Say you want to weigh 150 pounds, that's how much protein you need a day, 30 to 50 grams spread out throughout the day at once. And then you can figure out your protein is there. And then you figure out your fat and carbs from that, and then with the exercise, add that in. Seems like that way, or what do you think on that?
Yeah, so that's one way of thinking about it. But the thing is that, certainly the protein part is in most cases the part that requires the less adaptation. If you're, muscle building, then you should be aiming for, say, 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, or 1 gram for pound of body weight. But the approach that we take is we first determine fat and carbohydrate intake, and then the balance is going to be protein, which ends up following the rule that I just described. Okay. So yeah, going on to the exercise test.
Yeah.
The main focus here is, first of all, understanding what is your exercise limitation. So what system between heart, lungs, and cells is actually impeding your performance? In order for your body to work and produce mechanical propulsion, basically go from point A to point B, it needs to deliver oxygen down to the cell. And there are 3 main systems that participate in this: lungs, absorb the oxygen; heart, push the oxygen; cells, use the oxygen. Now, any person that we test is going to have one or more problems across that chain of systems. And the first, the predominant reason why we're conducting the test is to understand where the problem lies. Because depending on where the problem lies, we're going to prescribe personalized training in order to tackle the inefficiency that we found. That's the first thing. The second thing is to understand how fuel utilization changes across the spectrum of intensities. Based on how fuel utilization is changing, that is going to dictate the training zones, right? So this process is basically allowing us to determine what is your zone 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, these zones are important because they are going to inform how you should be doing your endurance training and your HIIT training. Because the reality is that these zones effectively correspond areas of intensity where fat and carbohydrate oxidation and therefore metabolism work in different levels. And as a result, because they work in different levels, they elicit different biological adaptations in your body. As a result, training in different training zones means that you are inflicting different biological adaptations on your body. So if you know your zones, you can know what type of stimulus you're providing to your body. As a result, your training is much more informed. As a result, you're getting a bigger bang for the buck. For example, the most potent and evident and popular example is, where is my zone 2? Because in my zone 2, I get the highest fat oxidation. As a result, I am training my cells the most in terms of becoming fat adapted. As a result, when I'm going for my long runs, I get the most out of my workout.
Okay. Okay. So when you're testing, we have a face mask on. Are you measuring oxygen, carbon dioxide to figure the RQ value, which helps us figure out percentage of fat, and then we can determine the metabolic crossover point where they're burning carbohydrates 100%?
Correct. Yeah. So standard breath analysis basically includes the measurement of 3 basic variables. One is oxygen concentration, second one is CO2 concentration, and the third one is flow volume. So by analyzing these 3 signals, we derive 23 biomarkers. RQ is one of them. RQ, respiratory quotient, or RER, respiratory exchange ratio, would tell us what the breakdown between fats and carbohydrates is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what so many people, when I'm testing or when I used to test, is wants to know, okay, where's my heart rate, where I'm burning the most fat, and where's my, tempo, and where's my speed work supposed to be, what numbers I'm trying to hit. So that's a big part. And then before I forget, training peaks, TriDot Academy, are you integrating this data that you collect into different programs? And I know you did something with Whoop. Are you how do you integrate the data you collect from, say, your resting tests? And we'll get to the exercise zones, but your training zones we figure out from this test. Do they correlate with any?
Typically the way it works with our affiliates is that because people are using different programs, we in different software, we basically provide the training zones in our report, and then each individual can use whatever software they works best for them. A lot of them are just punching the zones into training peaks, and that's fairly easy.
Good. And then with the breathing and the metabolism, wasn't there something in Whoop that you were looking at? Do you guys do anything with Whoop or Aura or heart health to just look at your breath work?
There is something in the works, but not something that is currently widely available.
I read like a couple of years ago, heard you with the Whoop podcast or somebody.
The pandemic actually brought a lot of,
okay, going back in time, but I remember seeing that. It's like, that'd be cool. It's just, I find it is that we have, as a coach, and I work with all collecting biometrics, is to have it all, like the APIs integrate into one spot is kind of impossible, I think, but everyone has their own portal, so we have to go everywhere. But if we can get the data. So going back to exercise test. So if we put someone, we get their resting test, and that, let's kind of walk through that real quick, is resting on a mat or like a lounge chair for 15 minutes. How long does that take?
Resting test takes about 5 to 10 minutes. And then the exercise test is about 10 to 15.
Okay. So have you looked at people, because when I tested way back when, we had this kind of, I figured out now, I look at what I know now, I wish I knew back then, but the black box, if people are stressed out, and you find, if you have any of your PNOE coaches or people testing, to get them to relax and to get a true data in the resting test, because so many people are sympathetic dominant that you almost want to take them through a body scan or meditation.
This is something that actually happens a lot. What we typically recommend is just take their attention away from their breath, because this is what causes them to start breathing abnormally and messes up the data. I think the most the easiest thing to do is just pull up a video that is going to take their mind off of the breathing.
No, well,
Um,
don't say what type of video, because it sounds like something when you're trying to get pregnant.
yeah, that really depends on your audience. I wouldn't be able to comment on that, but yeah, I've seen that work pretty effectively in many cases. So I'll just leave it at that.
All right, move on a side note, but just I think it's just finding people, because I used to test people in the morning before they get going for the day versus after work, and their data
Yeah.
would be so different. If you've been stuck in traffic, you
Oh,
had a stressful
yes,
day,
yes, yes.
the time of day makes a
Yeah.
difference.
So what we recommend is that consistency in time of testing is more important than the actual time of testing. So if you're testing someone, say 4 p.m., make sure you retest again 4 p.m. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is trends, right?
Mhm.
Obviously, it's much better if you test in the morning. You, in many cases, delete many of the external factors that may be affecting your data. And it's not impossible to get someone into a fully rested state, even if they are not, testing first thing in the morning. But it's easier to do it if you're testing them first thing in the morning.
Yeah. Okay. And then another thing I just thought of, because my brain starts firing on these topics, but if you had their resting data, if you look at your resting heart rate, their heart rate variability, and then if they wore a CGM, look at their glucose while you're testing too, it'd be kind of cool. But that's the resting test, just to kind of see what percentage of fat. So we're collecting data at their resting tests for fat, carbs, and you're finding their calories burned too. And then their oxygen consumption. You can test that too, if they're efficient breathers or not. That's kind of the main part. I think a lot of people don't breathe right.
Correct. Now, the efficiency of your breathing is evaluated through several other things, including your breathing rate, your tidal volume, your end tidal CO2. And then when we do the assessment, both resting and active, we have an HRV assessment as well. So you're wearing a chest strap that collects RR intervals. And through this analysis, we calculate low frequency, very low frequency, and high frequency component of heart rate variability. And through this information, we're actually able to understand sympathetic balance. And this is how we actually analyze your breathing efficiency.
Just to review, if people don't know it, LF is low frequency, and that correlates to your sympathetic, because it's opposite what you think. But low frequency is sympathetic nervous system, and HF is high frequency, is your parasympathetic. So we want to see that. And I love to collect that data on people, because so many people are way too sympathetic dominant. So that's great.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
We're actually coming up with some pretty exciting new test modalities. Predominantly resting ones. It's going to be the so-called stress report, quote unquote, that is going to basically take people through a variety of breathing frequencies. And the purpose here is to, first of all, understand your resonance breathing frequency, which is the breathing rate at which your heart, lungs, and nervous system, and as a result, brain, into some sort of synchronization. And breathing at that rate has been shown to elicit the biggest possible impact in calming you down and producing a series of health benefits. Also, through this assessment, you will be able to understand what is your optimal breathing rate on a day-to-day basis, and then also what is the contribution of psychological and physiological stress on your body overall.
You guys need to get on Huberman Lab and talk about that podcast.
It will be,
I just was listening to him.
Yeah.
But that's I've talked to Hanu Health. I should connect you with them, because that's what they have a breath work app and measuring HRV with that. But I think, just to throw in, I interrupted again, but it's so exciting because to just collect all this data and help people figure out that their breath work could help them almost burn more fat, be efficient fat burners, if they learn how to breathe and manage their stress.
Yeah. There is a cascade of negative effects that kicks in when our sympathetic and parasympathetic systems go out of whack, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is that breathing is the most potent lever of the sympathetic and parasympathetic balance. That's why people should consider breathing as a very serious tool for overcoming a lot of, conditions, chronic conditions that, may not necessarily fall into the category of, oh, I need to take drugs or go to the hospital, but it is something noticeable that is reducing quality of life. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's big, but we better get the last bit here. I want to talk about exercise testing because this is metabolic efficiency testing is huge for athletes. I've been a huge advocate since 2005. I started testing people and haven't been able to for years. And I love to test people because you can really personalize their program. So we can take this metabolic testing kit, put someone on a bike or a treadmill or even on a track and measure. So talk us kind of what data we're collecting exercise and how we can use that to personalize their exercise training, but also their fueling program and tie it all together.
Awesome. So going back to what I said earlier, by analyzing these 23 biomarkers, which are derived from oxygen, CO2, and tidal volume, just to give examples of these biomarkers, RER, respiratory exchange ratio, it gives us a breakdown between fats and carbs. Another one is caloric expenditure. We use that to analyze running economy, VO2 max, anaerobic threshold, O2 pulse. It gives us, information around how much oxygen the heart pumps into the system per heartbeat, et cetera, et cetera. So you have this bucket of 23 biomarkers. First thing you do is you understand where the chain breaks. Lungs, heart, cells. What system is posing the greatest limitation? Okay, let's say it's lungs. There is specific interval, endurance, and resistance training that is going to focus on that. If it's cells, it's a different one. In terms of training, there are basically three important components that come from our prescription. First of all, what is the breakdown between the three major categories of training? These include endurance, interval, and resistance. We will actually tell you how much you should be doing from each one and then how each one should look like. Specifically, when it comes to interval and endurance, we will further specify it using your training zones. So your training zones are basically determined so that your endurance and your HIIT training can be more effective. And then the third component of the prescription is, as you mentioned, fueling. So because we understand fat and carbohydrate utilization across the spectrum of intensities, we can tell you if you are running for an hour, say in zone 2, this is how many carbs you're going to burn. And as a result, if you're training for a long time, or if you're completing a race or something, this is how many calories of carbohydrates you need to consume, and so on and so forth.
That's so cool. So that's what I love. And I used to do that myself when I was racing for Ironman, when we did metabolic testing, and I could train. And this is it, like, as you said, it was before I started really playing with nutrition. I started getting into low carb and real food early on, but I was able to get my heart rate. When I was 40 years old, I was up to 160 something, burning a ton of fat. So I got so metabolically efficient to be able to run and race. So then when I would do Ironmans, I knew exactly where to stay and burn a ton of fat and not have to eat a lot. And then get off the bike and I'd feel strong on the run and I would do well in my races. But that's because of metabolic efficiency training and using that data to figure out what heart rates I need to stay at and then figure out my nutrition. But I think it's key if someone wants to really get a personalized program, we need to test and not guess and collect more data to really put their program together.
Exactly.
So what type of protocols, if you're on a treadmill, how long is each stage, and what's kind of the basic ones? You have the ramp test. What type of test do you like to do?
It depends on the fitness level of the individual. Test typically starts with a warm-up, and then you increase the intensity. Typically a set increment, say, 0.5 miles or 1 mile every minute.
Okay. So 1 minute stage, and then But you can add in custom training programs and stuff. So if we want to see someone kind of reach steady state at such heart rate, you can stay for 3 minutes or 5 minutes and kind of change it
You
if you
can do
want.
that. You can do that. You know, there's very specific protocol that you need to follow, which is pretty much what I described when
Yep.
you're getting the report, because
Yes.
we actually need to analyze things under very standardized conditions.
Mhm.
Now, can you venture out and do your own testing and do your own analysis using our platform 100%?
Yeah. Well, that's what I used to do with New Leaf. It was 1 minute a stage, and we would get data from that, and I'd look at the whole report of each minute. I just loved seeing, how it changes. But then I know I started experimenting when Bob Seebehor, I did his metabolic efficiency technician's certification years ago, and it was changing that to go a little longer, but not, it would kind of, mess up the reports, but it's just interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
So I was wanted to know about that. So with this information, when we get the test, we can figure out people's off-season training, nutrition, preseason and in-season training a little bit more too, because we often talk about train low, race high, but we can really dial in their nutrition. So I know Dr. Dan Plews talks about this in Endure IQ that, once you get this data of where you're burning what fat, how many calories you burn, you can really do the math and figure out, all right, if I'm trying to race, this is my calories I need per hour on a bike and then on the run for someone racing.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
depending on the limitation of the person at each specific point in time, the whole, program that I described, which basically includes the breakdown between resistance, endurance, and hit training zones, and then the fueling is going to change.
Yeah. Cool. And then notice everyone, you said zone 2 and hit training. Down here and up here. You didn't talk about the in between.
Zone 3,
the
zone
black
4,
hole.
zone 5. Yeah. TLDR on these zones. Zone 3, the dead zone.
Yeah.
We
Ben Greenfield
almost,
used to always say the black hole training.
yeah, we should, in most cases, you should never use zone 3. Why is that? Because it gives you significantly higher load, the so-called allostatic load, for your body, which means that it wears you out. Because it's not that intense, you will likely complete trainings that will be almost as long as the ones that you do in zone 2. As a result, you will incur a lot more training load with getting significantly less fat adaptation. So the problem here with zone 3 is that you will end up accumulating a lot more training load within a week. That is problematic if you want to add muscle. That is problematic if over the coming days you have hit training and you need to really push it, etc., etc. And obviously it's problematic if you're doing it for a very long time, you may get injured. Zone 4, typically the zone that we use for pushing VO2 max. It's a zone that we use to complete, for the most part, the so-called heavy endurance, which is, steady state in high intensity that you can maintain for, say, 30 minutes or even longer, depending on your fitness level. Zone 5 is, for the most part, a zone that is used for intervals. Obviously, in zone 5, we can only last a few minutes. Many adaptations that occur in zone 5, including fat adaptations. It's a myth that you can only get fat adaptations in zone 2. You can also get fat adaptations by doing very intense intervals. And something else that is extremely important in terms of an adaptation of zone 5 is testosterone boosting. So for people wanting to build muscle or maintain high testosterone levels for health or other purposes, zone 5 intervals would be a great addition to your training. Obviously, how that fits into the whole program that we provide, it's a much longer discussion, but this is kind of the TLDR of these zones.
Yeah, and I think that's important because people need a coach to figure out the data and how to put in a program, because I see most people doing way too much HIIT training and not doing enough zone 2, and how to spread that out so a hard day isn't 2 easy days after that. Because even I went to master swimming today and I missed yesterday, and they did a really hard workout, and then today they're doing a hard workout. I go, you guys should not be doing a hard workout if you worked really hard yesterday. But people don't get that.
Yes,
that
yes.
they
I mean,
don't recover.
doing 2 heavy workouts one after the other is, it's not obviously something that, is always recommended. I don't know exactly what, they had in mind, but, typically what you need to look at when you're, actually doing periodization is making sure that volume goes up. Progressive overloading is the, driving force behind any sort of adaptation and any sort of achievement of fitness goal, be it going through Kona, looking more toned, and even longevity. So for as long as you have a program where you can justify and measure that, for example, volume in your in the weight room is going up, the amount of running that you can conduct over a period of time goes up, or the time you can spend in zone 4 and 5 goes up, then you're actually able to produce more energy, more work, and as a result, you're becoming a fitter person. So obviously how that, how your program ends up working for your everyday life, this is something that you need to work with your coach, because there are so many other factors that play into that. But I'm just, making this statement because a lot of people, come up with, the question of, okay, what is the optimal training program? What should the, North Star be? Well, the North Star is volume going up no matter what your actual end goal is.
So yeah, I think it's important to look at that. This information, it benefits fat loss, to figure that out. Number 2 is performance gains. We talked about that. And then the importance of longevity. So I always talk about how what you're doing now to train for your future self when you're 80 and 90 years old, as I watch my parents age. So it's looking at how we're performing now, so I'm not broken 2-3 years from now and not be able to do anything. That overachieving, high charging athlete that overtrains and under recovers.
Yeah, so I mean, the way metabolic analysis and what we provide as as a company ties into longevity is fundamentally no different than what we provide for athletes, in the sense that we do the test in order to understand what system is broken, and then we personalize wellness, which is in its essence nutrition, training, and breath work, in order to fix whatever problem is broken. By providing a more personalized program, you have, better chances of fixing whatever problem you have. And as a result, you're going to end up living longer and better. When it comes to longevity, the other benefit of breath analysis is that it does give you one golden biomarker for longevity, which is VO2 max. VO2 max is the most powerful independent predictor of how long and well you're going to live. So if you're looking to quantify longevity, and if you're looking to quantify the extent to which whatever you've been doing has been having a positive or a negative impact in terms of your likelihood for mortality and morbidity, then the best thing you can measure is your VO2 max. So in terms of longevity, what we provide is not just a tool for prescribing, but also a tool for quantifying progress and understanding whether you're headed in the right direction.
Great. Okay, last question. I've been hearing this a lot. Curious. Is there any way to use this test to know if someone who is fat adapted and been in nutritional ketosis too much, too long, that they're not able to have good carb burning? So is there a point that maybe they don't switch over? So it's been talked about a little bit, people that are metabolically flexible, but are they able to switch back to be carb burner, carb metabolism? Have you heard of that?
I have never heard of a case where someone was so so fat adapted that they weren't able to switch to carbohydrate oxidation. I don't even know if this is biologically possible, to be honest.
Well, I've heard people, that's why it's, if people are getting into ketosis and they're in nutritional ketosis all the time, that's what people call like keto flexibility. Ben Azadi talks about this, and other people are talking more that you need to flex in and out of being nutritional ketosis, not being deep in it all the time, that you lose the enzymes to break down and metabolize carbs as your fuel source. So I was curious if that's something you can ever test, if someone that's so good at being fat metabolism, they can't switch over to carbs very easily.
You can test it, and the way it would show up on the test is that, you know, throughout the test is the person is burning predominantly fat, and the person is not able to push high intensities, and they blow up before they actually have their carbs kick in. This is how it
That's
would
where I'd see
show
it.
up. Yeah. But I don't know if we've run into any such case.
Yeah, I've seen one example is someone that was testing some distance trail runners, and they had a test. I was like, wait, does that mean that they never went into carb, but they just kept burning fat and they didn't switch over? And I thought, well, maybe that's not a great thing. Maybe they just are not able to.
I would be wary about the calibration of the device because
Oh.
CO2 sensors are very, very sensitive to calibration. So because I haven't seen anything like this in the literature, I would be skeptical of this data. But, you know, if you have anything, you know,
I've been trying to research it, but it's hard to research, but it's something I see possibly happening if people are in nutritional ketosis so long. That's why people are saying 6 days in, 1 day out, or for athletes, every dinner have a carb refeed. But people who are doing no carbs for a long time and who are endurance athletes and racing, that'd be interesting if that starts to happen for people. But that'd be something new, not in the books. That'd be our research. I'll let you know.
Awesome.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much for that great review and information. And if people want to learn more or find someone to test them, what's the website where people can find someone that can test them? PNOE.com, easy. PNOE.com.
We don't have a locator currently live, but if you message us on the chat there, we will hook you up with the closest one. Someone from our team will, you know, get in touch with you, and we'll hook you up with the closest affiliate.
And if you're in San Diego, I know Kyle Johnson is in La Jolla right now, and we're going to collaborate and do testing here. So you can always come on down and do a nice little spa training fueling week and get it done and get your whole program written out based on your tests. So thanks so much. I love the information that you're getting, and I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with the other biometrics and collecting more data to really geek out on personalizing programs.
Yeah. Awesome. Debbie, thank you so much for your time, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you.